So, you ready? So first, I'm aware we're going to talk about tests. So first, all of you, please stand up. Come on, stand up. Let's proud. Together. You can sit down. I'm Ran. My name is Ran. Do you hear me? All good? Okay. Today we're going to talk about tests. And when I say tests, I'm talking about unit tests. We're not going to talk about E2E tests, and we're not going to talk about component tests because I don't believe in component tests. My talk is going to be opinionated. This is how I work at Wix, and this is how my team work at Wix. So, my name is Ran, and I'm a React Native developer. Originally, I'm an iOS developer. Before I came to Wix, I was a iOS developer. And I'm in Wix in the last 3 years. And I participate in React Native navigation, which is well started on GitHub, and should be, in my opinion, again, the first choice with... do you want to ask something? Oh, okay. The first choice for a navigation solution in React Native, and also React Native camera kit. And I would like you to meet my dog. This is Bono, and he is awesome Labrador. And even Bono has an Instagram. You can look for him. He is Bono Labrador. We try to maintain it. And when I say we, my girlfriend is over there. We came from Tel Aviv for here. Okay, so let's start. Wix, as Lev mentioned, is a website builder. So what we came here to talk about mobile. So we have a mobile app. As Lev mentioned, it's React Native since day one. We are a greenfield application. And when I say greenfield application, I mean we never had a native application before that we add React Native in it. We actually did React Native in it, and we start a new React Native project. We have the brownfield application, like Facebook, like Airbnb, that they had already a native application, and they add React Native into it. This is some numbers about our app. So we have millions of downloads, and we have lots of installation and active users. As Lev mentioned, we are approximately 70 developers in 4 sites: Tel Aviv, Kiev, Dnipro, and Vilnius. We wrote many React Native open source, approximately 60. Some of them are more maintained, some of them are less maintained. But basically, we are very encouraged to write open sources. So, in my talk, I would like to show you and answer 3 major questions. The first one is, why do tests? Actually, we're adding more code. More code is more thing to maintain, is more error prone. Maybe our test is not good enough. The second question is going to be, what to test? After we will figure out why to test, and I hope I will convince you that test is right, is the good thing to do. What to test, going to give us which part of our project we need to test. And finally, we're going to figure out how we're going to test it with a small example. And we're going to see another extra. So, why to test? When I'm writing code, for me, working code is not enough. I want a code that I can able to maintain. And this is very important for me. I'm here now, and tomorrow my colleague gonna get control of my code, and he need to get into this working code, and he need to have kind of a safety net for this. So for me, just working code is not enough. I don't like the fear that I don't like the feeling of the fear to change code. I don't want to break something. I want to have a safety net to the changes that I will do. None of us like to generate legacy code. Later on, we're going to define legacy code. But as you all probably know, legacy code is code without tests. I want to be able to refactor. I want to refactor as much as I want. I want to extract to methods. I want to change code. I want to be free. Immediate feedback, I think it's the most important part, the second most important part. in tests, you get immediate feedback. You get red light when your test is when your actually code is break, and you have a green light when your code is ready to go. But as I mentioned, this is the second important part for me. The most important part for me, the tests actually improve the code design. If it's hard for me to test it, so I probably designed something bad. So I need to change the design of the code. I need to configure some other things like dependency injection. Maybe it will help me, and we're going to see that later. After I hope I convince you why to test, let's jump to the second question. What we need to test? Let's name the project parts. So for each React Native project, in like zoom out, we have the view, which contains screen, component, my component that we wrote, my external component that we brought from external NPM library. We have the business logic, which contain actions, store, presenters, or you know them by maybe selectors. And we have the services. We're not going to talk a lot about presenters and services. We're going to focus more about the view, actions, and the store. When we come to develop in React Native, in React application, React actually forces us to use the Flux architecture, a unidirectional data flow. Let's explain a little bit. User presses the view, raising an action. The action does what it needs to do. Maybe call to a service, maybe fetch for maybe a network request, maybe going to a database, like internal database. After he figured out all the stuff that he brought from outside or inside, he changed data in the store. Data change in the store, we get the state management, maybe Redux, Mobix, or we use one of our open sources is Remix, that the store is binding with the view. So actually, the data is binding with the view. So if something changed in the store, so the view gonna be changed. Let's dive into each element. First, actions. So actions are the actual worker. They're actually doing the work. They update the store. They fetch network requests if they needed. They interact with the services if needed. We want to test it. We want to be 100% coverage. We want maybe 100% code coverage if we're using TDD. So for sure, we're going to TDD with action part. What we need to test in action? For me, I test only side effects. Let's define what side effect is. So side effect modifies some state outside its local environment. It's a bit tricky because when I say local environment, for me, it's the same file as the action is written. If it's like a class or a static functions. No matter if actions call to another action, I don't need to test it. It's not a side effect. If the other question has some side effects, so it's something else. Actions might call setters, getters from the store. We want to test it. This is side effect, pure side effect. Fetch some data from the network. Might call to services and might broadcast event or message. Of course, we want to test it. Let's see a classical actions. I hope you can see all them in the back. This is the biggest that I could do. So here we have the get to do. Should be get rockets. So first I set the loading. Of course, I want to set it. Then I fetch some data. Then I filter something, which, as I mentioned before, this is not side effect. I play with the data. Like, I don't need to side effect. You can be very religious, and you can say that you can mock Lodash here and be ready that filter is being called. But let's be less religious than this. And then I say the data, and finally I say the loading. So basically, this is a classical action. Stores. So stores hold the application state. All the internal application states is in the store. We have the initial state and all the data that has been changed. Store include getters and setters, as I mentioned before, and also selectors. If you don't like to have selectors in your stores, you can use presenters, no matter, unless we want to have it test. We want also to have it like 100% tests. What we need to test in store? When I come to test the store, so I prefer to test it like before and after. First, I have the initial state or predefined predefined store state, and then I want to change it. I want to change after the state changed. That's the example. Very straightforward state. So we have here the data. We have the getters. Remix, as I mentioned before, this is our open source. We use it for the state management. You can use Redux or Mobix or some other state management. So we have the getters. Here we have get data. And we have the setters. This is how the tests of the store can be look like. So this is the before state. I decide to do it like with the initial state, which is empty. The data is empty. Then as I set the data here, with of course mock data, and here I test the after the state change. So here I test before and after. Views. So here comes my personal opinion part. I don't test views. I don't believe to test views. For me, views is a component for building UI. When I say component for building UI only, it's like no business logic in my views. I keep it that I won't have any business logic in my view. Views might call to action, might listen to data change from the store, and might use some modified data from the presenter or the selector. And again, I don't test it. But we need to test in view. So I have a rule of thumb, something that I more or less invented, logical if. So I keep my views without any logical if. This is a logical if. Here, you see that the view actually know a lot of stuff, stuff that he doesn't need really to know about it. He knows that rockets is an array. He knows that the array might be bigger than 3, and he actually make a decision and he renders something which is not something that infer directly from the store. This is something that infer directly from the store. If it's loading, if I got is loading, so I'm rendering the loader. It's very classical render function. So in this case, I will add in map state to my function map state to props. I will add, whoops. Back here, if I need to fix it, so I will add a property. Should I render a long list, for example? And then if it say true, so I render this. By this approach, I don't assume that I know this is maybe an array, or if I need to change from array to JSON, my view won't be break. If I need to actually, I'm sorry, this is the only place that I found to put it. If I need to change, if I need to test the actual view, so this is how my test should look like. So I have a button here, and I will expect that on to-do press is being called. In my opinion, is useless, because here I test the framework. And I don't test the framework. For me, the framework is a black box. And what if it won't happen? Anyway, I don't have nothing to do with it. So why to test it? So I keep to test only my code. Okay, for the third question, how to test? So we have a lot of testing approaches. But for me, what's my direction is, If it's hard for me to test it, so I probably design it wrong, as I mentioned before. No matter if you use TDD or you keep your code is 100% coverage, it's no matter. Anyway, if it's hard for you to test it, so you probably design it wrong. So you want to consider to re-architecture your code. Maybe use some dependency injections, maybe use some other design patterns that is common for these cases. Let's talk about how to test with example. So as you can see here, this is the initial state, loading state, and user press the button, we're passing to loading state, and then we see the list. Initial state, user clicks, loading state, and we're showing the data. Okay, so the initial state, we don't have data, so I render these rockets. And by the way, probably you wrote it, you read it. We are in rockets. So this is how this render look like. If loading, I render loader. If not, I'm rendering this view. Second one, user press the button. I move to loading states, and I go with my action to fetch the data. It's going to be a lot of code. Try to be with me. First, this is the only code that I add in my own press. All the logic, all the work is going to be done in actions. This is how my action. This is how the actions look like. So it set the set loading. This is the reason we see this here. And then we're going to my rocket service, which also 100% tests the service. We fetch the data there. Then I filter, as I mentioned before. This is something that is side effect. I don't want to test it. And we set it in the store. And finally, we set the loader to false. This is in the next. This is going to be the action tests. As you can see here I mock all the stuff that I need. I mock store, I mock the service, and I call this action, and I check the set loading is being called. This is side effect. I want to test it. I get the rockets data that it's been called. I want to test that I do a fetch, that I'm calling the service. And then I set a data. Again, it's an operation, it's a setter on the store. I want to test it. It's side effect. And finally, I set loading. This is how the service look like. They actually fetch the rockets data. Very straightforward. Here we fetch. Here we are returning. This is the only element in my project that know what the contract with the server. The server brings me back a JSON with rockets, and then it's array. So I prefer to keep it like this, that the only single part will know the structure of the contract with the server. This is how the test should look like. So I have a rockets, and then I mock the return value of the HTTP. HTTP is another service. I use it as more or less dependency injection, so it's very easy to me to mock it. So I mock the HTTP get, and I mock return value with the object rockets, and then I check that the answer is as rockets. And finally, data arrived, and I show the list. Map state to props. I hope you're all familiar with. It's by Redux, by Mobix, also by Remix. Map state to prop. This is actually what connects the store with the view. And here, this is how this screen renders look like. So if it's loading, so I show the loader. Otherwise, I show the list. If the button and the list. As I promised, I have some extra. This is my favorite GIF. I really like this guy. During my work, I deal with legacy code many times. So first, legacy code, as we mentioned before, is a code without tests. I found here a really nice quote that we're gonna read it together. That I really believe it. Code without tests is bad code. It doesn't matter how well written it is. It doesn't matter how pretty or object-oriented or well encapsulated it is. Well tests, we can change the behavior of our code quickly and verifiable. Without them, we really don't know if our code is getting better or worse. I really connect to this quote. I think it says that no matter what we are doing and how our code design is good, if we don't have tests, so we pretty much are very tight coupled with the current implementation. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I deal during my work with a lot of legacy code. So this is how I handle this. First, we have, if I'm looking at all the test suites that we have, so we have E2E tests, and we have mocked E2E test. This is a full E2E test with the real servers. This is the mock servers, but again, it's E2E. We checked only users' flows. And we have the unit tests. So first, we start with what we have. We have a working code. Let's work with it. This is the only thing that we have. I try to wrap my working code with as much as confidence that I can with E2E tests. I have working code. This is the only thing that I have. I'm afraid to touch even line of code because I might break something. So I work with the stuff that I have. So I add a lot of E2E tests, as much as coverage E2E sets that I can. When I say coverage, it's not as like 100% code coverage, because it's not exactly line of code. It's more like flows coverage. Then I refactor, and I keep in mind that each time I refactor and I'm adding a new code, I keep to add a unit tests. And I go back to 1 if I need to add more tests, refactor, add unit tests to the new code, back to 1. Let's sum up. Let's wrap up what we talked about. So first, we understand why we need to test. I hope I convince you. Second, we answer what to test. And third, and how to test. Finally, you got some extra dealing with legacy code. And basically, that's all. If somebody have some questions, we'll be happy. The first 5 questions are gonna get Duck. Yes. Welcome. Sorry. It's like your style. For me, I'm not that religious. I'm writing the code, and just like after this, I'm writing the tests. I'm honest. I'm not using TDD. I think it's so hard to keep TDD workflow. It might delay the development Yes, but it's like more of, yeah, it's the style. Okay. Just a second. You're gonna be the next speaker. You're gonna get this for free. Oh. No, we don't have 100% cover. We wish to have 100. Yeah, sure. Our application architecture is by modules. We have like tens of modules. Each module is completely independent. He can decide his state management. He can decide his test strategy, and he can decide his code coverage. We try to be as much independent as we can. What do you mean where? here, oh, no. Here, oh. Here we have the test pyramid. So we try. This is all the three major tests that we have. We have E2E tests. We have mocked E2E test. That from here, this is the developer writing. I in charge to write unit tests and mock E2E tests. E2E tests is the responsibility of our QA team, because they looking at our application as a black box. They doesn't know how the code is really implemented. It's like input, output. Yes, but we're not like we're not publish it this to the store, of course. It's gonna it's like ignore. Pavel, you want to pick color, Pavel? Pavel? Can you get the mic, please?
So I have two questions actually. Can we get back to the first time you show us your test code, like example of the test?
Of the store?
Yes. Yes. When you're fetching data.
This one? Ah, fetching data.
Fetching data.
In the example?
Yes. No, not example, but yeah, test example.
This one?
Yes, this one. So, and the test example for this.
I don't think that I wrote
so
test.
There is a test example where you filter data that you just received.
No, it's not this.
No. Okay, maybe it's in how to test section.
Thinking I know what you're meaning. This one? This one?
Yes, this one. So, like, if you're not testing side effects, what's the point of filtering mock data here?
For me, when I'm writing the same code in the actual action and in the test, you see it's exactly the same code.
Yeah, so it's like
for me, it's forced me to write TDD, because TDD, it's like I know that I need to filter anyway in the test, so just copy paste. I know copy paste is like a curse, but basically you can take this one out to a service, filter service, mock it, and do it. You're right, basically. But I just want to give you the feeling that you're not having to test each line of code to get a test coverage.
Okay. And another question is about detox. Like, do you use it? How extensively?
Yeah. We use it a lot. We use it for iOS and we use it for Android. We use it like in the two parts of the pyramid, the test pyramid. We use it for the full E2E test, the full flows, and we use it also for mock E2E tests. So the developers and the QA both know how to work with it. We really try to make each component to have a test ID, that we're not testing by labels. Our applications translated to 16 languages, so we're not count on the labels. We count on test IDs, so it's hard to map all the app in test ID. We have like, I think, more or less thousands of screens.
Does it somehow conflict with accessibility IDs?
It is accessibility IDs.
Oh, so
if you go into accessibility inspector in your Mac, you're gonna see this.
Okay.
It is. We use it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you.
You want to pick color?
Thank you. I want to say thank you for presentation. It was really interesting. And I have interesting question for you about legacy code. Were there situations in your work where code was so bad and so badly written that tests can't help you, and your team needed to rewrite whole project or a big part of code?
Okay, for me personally, it happened like maybe 4 times. I got a module. I told you that our app architecture is by modules. So I got a module. It was like non-test at all, maybe a small test, and I came like, it's working code. Like I don't know where to start even. So I came to one of my test gurus, and I told him like, afraid to touch a code. Exactly what I mentioned here. I'm afraid to touch the code. He told me, start to get confidence. It's not about even to to test your code. It's more to get a confidence to change stuff. So I get some confidence. So it was a very sensitive code that it wasn't covered, and if I change something, it might all the app break. So I got like confidence, and then I was ready, and I had immediate indication for my new code, and I got like, and then I was confident to actually refactor my code. Actually, I changed from Remix from Redux to Remix, which is a big change.
Okay, thank you.
Color? I think it's the best.
Thank you for your talk. It was interesting. First question about actually this test. Yeah. What about tight coupling your test code to the code in your action?
What do you mean, like?
Your test defines your code if you're using TDD or others in other directions. It just when you want to change your function, you will need to change this test.
You're right.
Actually,
It depends. Sometimes you want to change, if you change the exact function, so probably you need to change the test. But if you change some other function and this test change, so you understand that you broke some other things, that this is your safety net. This is exactly where the test, all the power for the test, that you change something that you are not expected to be break. Sometimes you change code and you know that its test going to be break. But if you change some other code and this one is break, so you understand that you changed it wrong. You got it?
yeah, I actually trying to figure out it for myself. I just deepen into testing now, and trying to figure out how you define things which you can actually migrate to a test and which you cannot. So maybe we'll have a talk after. And second question, you told us that you push a new version to production every day.
We try to do that. We're not there yet. We try to do that.
I get. So you are doing it on hand, or
No,
it's continuous
no,
integration, Bitbucket?
Yes. Fastlane, of course.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
Welcome.
you very much.
Who wants the last duck? Question? Yeah. Get it? Oh.
Thank you. So I have one question. You told that you think you don't need to test views, and I want to ask you why, because we can use snapshot or something like this.
Ooh.
No,
You're talking about like visual tests?
Yes.
Visual tests is completely complicated. Visual tests is hard. I didn't see any visual test framework that I can work with, but visual test is super hard. Even E2E tests is not enough for visual tests, because maybe the computer gonna say this one is on the screen with size 0 and everything, like the width 0 and height is 0, but the test gonna pass, but you won't see it like on screen. It's gonna happen. Visual test gonna break.
But and if we can test functional components that have no state, and in this case you also don't have any. You can have like failed tests.
Say it again. Functional.
We can use functional components that doesn't have any state, and in this case you think we also can have our test failed.
Why? A functional component that you don't have any state.
I think that we have height like 0 if we use it from state, and there's something not loading at all, and if we have functional test, we can use this for buttons or just for placing in different parts of our screen. And I think in this case we can use snapshot.
Of course. Okay. Again, snapshot. Okay, again, snapshot is like a completely other topic.
Okay. 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 Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much, guys.